If you are in the market for a lightweight 17-inch gaming laptop, you may want to consider the MSI GF75 Thin 9SE that is available at Hidevolution. With a 9th gen i7-9750H CPU and the new GTX 1650 Max-Q graphics. So stay tuned to see if this laptop is worth picking up. Hi, Stephen from OWNorDisown. Hidevolution were kind enough to send me MSI's GF75 Thin 9SE. Now this previously had an 8750H CPU and up to a GTX 1050 Ti graphics. Now the 9750H brings a 100 MHz boost when all 6 cores are active and 400 MHz boost in single thread workloads. But as we all know, on a sustained load, the 8750H would tend to throttle down quite a bit, especially in CPU intensive tasks. So how will this 9750H compare? The GTX 1050 Ti is a 70 watt part, but the new 1650 Max-Q, based on the Turing architecture, has a TDP of only 35 watts. It does have 128 more shaders, and this new architecture is 50% more efficient than Pascal. Unlike the 1660 Ti, it does not include the new NVENC encoder, but an older one similar to Pascal. Quickly comparing times by graphics scores, the 1650 Max-Q scores 64% more. Now sure, perhaps older drivers might be to blame for the 1050 Ti low score, but it surely implies that we have an improvement here, not only in performance, but also in power consumption. The GF75 must be the lightest 17-inch gaming laptop I have used. At 4 pounds 12 ounces, it's lighter than many 15-inch ones. Even with the power brick, it is lighter than most 17-inch laptops without the brick. It achieves this by slimming down its dimensions and the use of brushed aluminum on its lid, keyboard deck and plastic on the bottom cover. Now if I was to have one complaint on how it looks, I feel that the brush pattern on the lid is a little bit aggressive. I love the keyboard deck though. The keyboard itself is spacious with the keys painted and backlit red, which is the only available colour. The keys have a good feel to them and there appears to be no mention of Steel Series here. You do have a separate number pad, but I would prefer to have the delete key swapped with the pause break key, as it does seem to be sort of lost amongst the other keys. I love the clean, simple look though, with the large power button in the center. There are no Windows Hello cameras or fingerprint readers at this $1,200 price point though. One thing that struck me straight away was the very nice panel. We are talking 88% screen to body ratio here. Now this is achieved by the very slim bezels, but also by the very narrow chin. Your eyes are actually drawn to the panel. It's like a window through which you can witness all that is being displayed. The color accuracy is also pretty good, especially for a 60Hz IPS level panel, so MSI didn't throw rubbish at us here. It's also plenty bright at 320 nits. As expected though, if you are sensitive to ghosting during gameplay, a faster refresh rate would be better for you. As for the backlight bleed, it was pretty non-existent. Despite the thin bezels, the 720p webcam is up top. So this is the webcam, and I think it looks pretty clear. It's a 720p one, but it's probably one of the better ones. On the left, there are 2 USB Type-A ports, HDMI, power connector, and an air exhaust. On the right is the Kensington lock, separate headphone and mic jacks, a third USB-A port, USB-C port, Ethernet jack, and an air exhaust. The back has a clean look with just 2 air vents. You will notice that when you open the panel, it makes contact with the desk and it lifts the rear end up, which aids with the air intake. You will also notice that the rear exhausts extend to under the screen. And indeed, the chassis is very cool when under load, even underneath, maxing out in the low 30 degrees Celsius mark. Now to get inside, you remove several Phillips head screws and remove the plastic cover. Here is the 51 watt-hour battery, which is good for 4 hours 40 minutes streaming YouTube at 25% brightness. You have 2 2-watt speakers firing down at the front, an open 2.5-inch bay, and here is the Intel 9560 Wi-Fi card. The M.2 slot is good for both PCI Express and SATA drives. The RAM is 16 GB running dual channel and maxing out at 64 GB. Here is the GPU and CPU, each with 2 separate heat pipes, which I like to see, and you have 4 heatsinks. The Dragon Center software has the usual system monitoring options. System Tuner lets you choose between sport, comfort and eco profiles, as well as various fan options. Now this includes being able to create your own fan curve. They also have good battery management software that allows you to prevent the battery from overcharging and also to calibrate it to prolong its lifespan. If you want to monitor all of this via your mobile device, you can do so via an app. At idle, the fan is only 35 decibels, but it definitely has a whirring sound which you definitely can hear. Even under load, the auto fan is quiet at 40 decibels. It does cycle though, ramping up and down, and I would prefer if it was just a steady rate so it would be less noticeable. The cooler boost fan definitely moves a lot of air, and it is pretty loud at 55 decibels, but it is definitely needed to cool down the laptop unless you are comfortable with undervolting. Now Hidevolution didn't apply any thermal paste here, but they did apply a 50 millivolt undervolt. Now that is one advantage with Hidevolution. But if you want to have a repaste, they do offer a number of options, and it's all warranted. Now here are my undervolt and overclock settings. I undervolted the core more than the cache, and as you will see, this really helped with temperatures. I also overclocked the GPU 196 MHz on the core and 407 on the memory. Here is Witcher 3 with auto fan, and you will see that the CPU does go into the mid 90s. Now applying the max fans increases the turbo boost on the GPU and drastically reduces the temperature on the CPU and GPU by about 30 to 40 degrees. So what happens when we undervolt and overclock with the auto fan? The GPU also boosts higher, the CPU and the GPU temperatures remain very cool, and the frame rate goes up. So in all of my benchmarks, I use max fan for obvious reasons, but in the video clips I wanted to show how this compared to auto fan with the undervolt and overclock settings, because I much prefer 40 decibels of fan noise over 55. So overclocking actually gave a nice 14% boost, in Witcher 3. Despite this, I recommend using high settings if you want 60 FPS. In Overwatch, Epic settings, max fans and auto fan with the undervolt both provide fantastic temperatures, and the CPU maintains a high boost clock. Now typically 90 MHz higher and 20 watts less than the 8758 it replaced. Overclocking with max fans did help boost frame rate again by about 10%, but this game is very playable even at Epic settings. Ordinarily the GTX 1060 is 33% faster, but it is reduced to 20% when I overclocked it. Now this bodes quite well with the regular 1650, which I expect to be about 25% faster than the Max-Q model. Rainbow Six Siege Ultra settings, overclocking with max fan sees a nice boost in frame rate and reduction in CPU temperature. It is still able to hold boost clock with 10 watts less. Even just using auto fan with the undervolt and overclock sees the CPU cooler than with just the max fan alone at much more palatable audio levels. Overclocking provides a 10% boost. Interestingly, we see only a 22% reduction compared to the much more expensive RTX 2060. But since the frame rate is so high, I suspect CPU performance is the governing factor here. Shadow of the Tomb Raider sees a nice frame rate boost with an overclock and undervolt, as you can see from the max fan footage. Switching to auto fan with the overclock and undervolt sees performance on par with what we saw with the stock max fan, with a lot less noise. Still, this is a tough game, and you may have to drop to medium to get to the 60 FPS mark. This time, since the game is more graphically demanding, the RTX 2060 is 47% faster than the GTX 1650 Max-Q. I suspect though that an overclocked full GTX 1650 would be quite close. Here is Battlefield 5 DX12 high settings with max fan. I'm very impressed with how the 9750H maintains its boost clock. This is something that was hit and miss with the 8750H. I recommend playing with high settings to get the 60 FPS mark, but if you want it better, it does scale as you lower quality settings. Running Passmark's GPU test was 18% behind the GTX 1060 and 48% ahead of the GTX 1050 Ti, for which it is a good replacement. Here are some CPU tests, comparing against the 8750H using Adobe Premiere Pro to do a 4K software render and measure the time taken The stock 9750H beats the Acer Triton 500's 8750H. Acer doesn't push the CPU too much, unlike the Lenovo Y740, which represents a best case scenario for the 8750H. The GF75 at stock falls behind, but once we undervolt the 9750H to show its true potential, we see a huge improvement of about 15%. In Cinebench R20, it takes an undervoted 8750H in the Triton 500 to match the 9750H, so I suspect the best 8750H would also match this. Undervolting the 9750 provides a 6% improvement. Using Handbrake to encode a 1080p video file to MP4, you see that the time taken is generally on par with the better performing 8750H models, but the best I could get was just shy of an average 3600 MHz clock. This was less than what I could get on the Strix Hero 2 and Y740 with the 8750H. Naturally, this is going to fluctuate depending on the laptop power delivery. So how would I sum up the MSI GF75 Thin? I really like the screen. Okay, it may not be a gamer screen, but its color accuracy was good and it is bright. Plus that small chin really shows it off nicely. I also like the keyboard and the clean look of its deck. Now the speakers are average and the auto fan, although quiet, doesn't really do a great job on cooling, and it's not super quiet at idle either. Now if you take advantage of Hidevolution's repaste options, this may well help. If not, then undervolting certainly reduces the temperatures and it also improves performance. And finally, I think it's an excellent choice if you really want a lightweight 17-inch laptop that doesn't scream gamer but can game fairly well. Now if it had battery life of at least say 6 hours, then that would complement its portability. Now its biggest hurdle may well be its $1,200 price tag, especially if you're just after a budget gaming laptop, as there are many GTX 1061s at this level already, which offer higher frame rates, but still there's a lot to like about this laptop, and it's something if you're interested in, make sure to stop by Hidevolution to check it out. I'd like to thank you for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.